My name is Trent Duncan, and I served in the United States Navy from February 2004 to February 2009. My name is Trent Duncan, and I served in the United States Navy from 2004 to 2009. My name is Trent Duncan, and I served in the United States Navy from February 2004 to February 2009. So growing up, I would consider I had kind of a regular childhood, I guess you could say. Went to the same couple of schools for my whole life growing up. Lived in about 2 houses. We were not a military family, so we didn't move around. We didn't do anything other than just have, I think, kind of a normal childhood. And it was good. I wasn't forced or talked or even had much discussion about the military as a job or a career. But when I graduated high school, I went to college for filmmaking, actually. And then I came to a pivotal point in my life where, okay, do I go get a 4-year bachelor's degree? Or do I do something else in the job market? And so one of my friends from high school, he actually joined the Army Rangers. And I thought that was kind of cool because I was just kind of looking for something to do. And so I went to the Army recruiter. I checked it out. Thought it was kind of cool. And I had actually talked to my mom about it. And she had reminded me, because I had known this, she reminded me my father, he was in the Navy, and he was a captain. He was a captain in the Navy Reserves. So I had gone to his retirement ceremony and been a little bit involved with some of the stuff he had done in the past. But it just kind of came back to me. It's like, oh, the Navy, that'd be a good thing to go into because, my grandfather was in the Navy. So let's go. Let's try it out. And me, of course, being a 21-year-old gung-ho young man, I wanted to try out for the Navy SEALs. And so at the age of 22, I enlisted in the United States Navy. And I signed up to try out for the Navy SEALs. And my job rate was Master at Arms. Growing up, I would say I had kind of a regular childhood. We grew up in Florida, and we would go to the beach on the weekends. We lived in 1 or 2 houses all the way up until I graduated high school, and middle income family. So I would say it was a pretty normal upbringing. So growing up, I never really looked to the military as a career until I came to a point in my life where I had my associate's degree in college, and I was looking to either get a bachelor's degree or do something else. And I really didn't want an office job. And so one of my friends from high school, I saw him at the gym one day, and he said he enlisted in the Army Rangers. And I thought that was cool, having something that's a little different, travel around, and use your physical talents to kind of advance your career. So I checked out the Army Rangers, and then my mom had mentioned that, yeah, grandfather was in the Navy. He was a captain in the Navy Reserves. And I thought, oh, that was great. So let me look at the Navy. And so I looked at the Navy, and then, of course, me being the gun-ho, young, physically fit individual I was at 22, I said, let me try out for the Navy SEALs. And so at 22, I signed up for the United States Navy in the rank of Master at Arms, and I also signed up to try out for the Navy SEALs. So in February of 2004, I was shipped up to Great Lakes for boot camp. Now, here's this Florida guy who grew up in Florida his whole life, and he's now in one of the coldest areas of the country in February. So there was snow on the ground. I was totally out of my element, and it was definitely kind of a culture shock of an experience. Not only going into boot camp where everybody's yelling at you and you're running around living in a barracks with 80 guys, but the fact that it was cold out and the weather was nothing like what I was used to growing up. So it was definitely a different and interesting experience. First time really kind of on my own, away from home. And, we get to write letters on Sunday, but no phone, no internet back then, really, that you can do stuff with. But it was a little bit of a culture shock. But nonetheless, it was 2 months. I got through it. And then after that, went down to San Antonio for my A school, which was a Master at Arms. So kind of like a police officer school down in San Antonio. For our A school, we were, for the Master at Arms A school, we were training down in Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. So here we were, a small group of Navy folks on a big old Air Force base. So we were a little bit out of place, but nonetheless, it was a good experience. We were training to be police officers. So Master at Arms were like security personnel for the Navy. And so one of the things we did was the OC spray, pepper spray. And so in order to carry pepper spray, you had to actually be sprayed with pepper spray yourself. So that was definitely an interesting experience because I had gone through the gas chamber while in boot camp, and I was one of the few individuals. Like there was a group of 80 of us, and there was probably maybe 2 or 3 of us that the gas chamber did not affect. Like I had snot running out my nose, but I wasn't crying. My ears weren't, or my eyes weren't watering up. I could see clearly. I could speak clearly. It was great. Meanwhile, everybody else is just they can't see. Everything is coming out of all orifices. It was ridiculous. So I was confident that, hey, perhaps the pepper spray won't affect me. But that was not the case. It hurt like hell. And really, it's not bad. It just really kind of crunches your eyes up and it makes you panic. But once you stop for a second and kind of breathe, it has this stinging sensation and this reaction in your face and your eyes that you just can't see. And so you kind of panic a little bit. But once you sit back and kind of get your wits about you, it's not bad. But what we had to do, we had to get sprayed across the eyes, or just above the eyes and the brow. We had to blink so it went in our eyes. And then we had to go through this obstacle course of hitting the red man and doing a few things so that they knew you could function while actually having the pepper spray in your eyes. So that was definitely an interesting day. But the good news is we had the rest of the day to recoup. I think it was a Friday, so we got off early, and we had the rest of the day to recoup and recover from that.
Did you hear a lot of stories about that before you did it?
For the
What it was?
Yeah, so leading up to getting pepper sprayed, there was a lot of talk of just how people would react, perform, and you're always kind of like, yeah, I can do all right and stuff, but you never really know until you get hit in the face with that stuff and it starts stinging, and then your eyes shut up, and then you can't really breathe too well, and everything just kind of goes blank. So there's that little panic mode that sits in. So as long as you have this little guy in the back of your head that says, hey, you can do this, it's not bad. Like once you just stop and take a breath, it's not that bad. But most people don't do that, and so that's why they kind of panic and they think that the whole world's going to hell. But it's definitely an experience, that's for sure. So Master Arms, we had weapons training. So we had weapons training we had to go through. So as a Master Arms, you have to carry a pistol, and you have to be proficient in the pistol and the rifle. So we would go to the range, firing range, and we use the 9mm Beretta, and we would become proficient in the 9mm Beretta, and then also the M16 service rifle. We would have to shoot that. And so some of us made expert. I wasn't expert the first couple times I did it, but eventually I got my expert ribbon when shooting that, probably later on when I was in my detachment. But that was kind of interesting because I had never shot a rifle before. I had shot a pistol and a handgun before, but never a rifle. So so the training for that was great. And it was fun to train to be like a police officer, to kind of get in the mindset of what police officers do. Even though I was never an actual security police officer on a base, that was one of the jobs that I could have gotten. I never did that. What I did in my career was security personnel or security services for detachment and went on deployments. But nonetheless, you're kind of trained as a police officer, which is kind of fun because it gives you a different perspective when approaching situations. Master at Arms school was 2 months long, and at the end of 2 months, you got your orders and you got shipped out to your duty station. And a lot of the folks from our Master at Arms class went down to, I believe, Puerto Rico, and we're on a base there for a couple of years or a couple months before they shut that down and moved on. But just myself and a couple other guys, we were still in the program to go try out for the Navy SEALs. We were in the BUDS program. And so after Master at Arms school, we actually got shipped back up to Chicago, Great Lakes, to do the scruff duty, which is folks that are waiting to class up to go to BUDS, which is in San Diego. So we were there for about 3 or 4 months, just training. And we were actually training the recruits and the folks in boot camp, which is what I would do when I was in boot camp. I would train with some of them. You'd go to the pool, you'd swim in the morning, you'd come back to your unit and spend the rest of the day with the unit. But for scruff duty, we were just stationed there, just like it was a duty station, but we were just trained all day long. So you just get paid to train, swimming, running, all that kind of fun stuff. And then when you class up, we classed up in August in order to head down to San Diego. So we classed up in August. We drove down to San Diego to join our group of 180 folks that were trying out for the BUDS Class 235. I'm sorry, BUDS Class 253. I get it mixed up because we used to watch the documentaries. So in August, let's see. So let's see. Here we go. So after being in scruff duty for a couple of months, me and 3 other guys drove in an old Bronco down to San Diego, California, and we classed up for our Buds Class 253.
Is that how it seemed
No, back
went? Or?
that seemed probably back in the old days. So after graduating boot camp, everybody in your barracks. So there's 80 of us in our graduation. Actually, there's 80 of us in our unit. 149. 149. Unit 149. There was 80 of us, and then I think there was 6 or 7 units at graduation. So 80 times 6 or 7, and everybody in my unit had a different school that they were going to. So after you graduated from boot camp, you went to a different part of the United States to attend your A school, which is basically your trade that you were taught. So mine just happened to be in San Antonio, Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio. So I had friends that were going to Connecticut. If you were going to go on a sub or nuke school, I think that was in Connecticut. Other folks going to just different bases all over. So everybody had kind of a different job that they were going to go to, a different skill set. And so after boot camp, you would go to that base, go to that school and learn that skill set. And then from there, you would get your duty station. So everybody kind of just, after boot camp, they just went all over. And like I don't know anybody now from my boot camp class, because back in 2004, you don't really have a way to connect with folks other than maybe write their name and email down. And maybe I did 1 or 2 of them, but there's a couple folks from my boot camp class that I stayed with when we went to Master at Arms school, because they were going to Master at Arms as well. And then we went to Buds training together as well too. But because when you wanted to try out for Buds back then, there was only like 6 or 7 ratings that you could do as a tryout to try out for the Navy SEALs. And so Master at Arms was just one of them, because this was shortly after 2001 with the September 11th, where they hired like 10,000 Master at Arms security personnel for the Navy. And I was on the tail end of that in 2004. I was on the tail end of that hiring of all those Master at Arms in order to go into the military. So in Buds, Navy SEAL training, you do 7 weeks of INDOC, which is basically them getting you acclimated to what you're going to do each day, kind of training. They help you with your stroke, your running, your swimming. So 7 weeks of kind of preparation, and then you class up. So there's only 3 weeks before the 4th week, which is Hell Week. And that's where most people drop out of Buds. That first week, they run you early in the morning, 5 a.m., you're up out on the beach getting wet. You go to breakfast, you go to the obstacle course or run around some more, do log PT, you go to lunch. You have maybe the boats in the afternoon that you're running boats and doing surf passage. And then you have dinner, and then you're kind of off. And I was kind of surprised about that, because after dinner, they just kind of leave you alone, and you're there in the barracks with your other classmates to clean your uniform, get your stuff ready for the next day. And then boom, you start all again in the morning. So I dropped out on request. So you ring the bell, so you DOR. I lasted a week and a half in first phase. And so there was probably like 60 or 70 folks that had dropped before me. And so when you drop, you take your helmet, because you have this helmet with your number 253 on it, and you bring it over there and you lay it on the ground with all the other helmets of the folks that have dropped. And then you ring the bell. And then when the instructors comes out, and he is a lot nicer than he is when you're in the actual program getting beat. And he's like, all right, man, come on in here. Let's fill out some paperwork. And then from there, you're in X division until you get orders to go to your next duty station, wherever that may be. So Buds was an exciting experience. I can tell you this honestly, even though I didn't make it through, it was the best thing I had ever done in my life, because I had trained for it for years. And just the fact of doing that and being there gives you such a sense of what your body is capable of doing, so much more than what your mind thinks you're capable of doing. So it really changed the definition of the word hard for me, because nothing really is hard after you do that. And for me, I dropped more of like from a mental cue standpoint as opposed to like a physical cue. So a lot of people will drop out or they'll get discharged because of medical stuff, or they hurt something in their body, something gets messed up. But I actually was pretty durable. I was kind of surprised how I stood up to it, which was great. But it was just kind of the mental part of it that got to me. So I like to think that 22-year-old Trent wasn't mentally tough enough, but 32 or even 41-year-old Trent could definitely push through the program so long as my body now held up. Because mentally, you just see stuff differently when you get older. You have a lot more knowledge and stuff. So it was experience. It was a great experience. I loved every minute of it. Met a lot of great people and learned a lot of great stuff about myself and just life in general.
I hear there's no shame for those dropping out because it's just that tough of a program to try to make it through.
Yeah, there's not a ton of shame because afterwards when I dropped out and I got my regular orders and I went back to a duty station, people talk to you about it, and there's a lot of people in the military that wish they would have done it or would have liked to tried and never actually do. So the fact that I did and I dropped out was it's not a big deal. Like I tried it, because there's a lot of people that don't even don't even try or don't even have the ability to try or don't have the chance to do it. And so there's nothing worse than just looking back and like, I wish I shoulda, woulda, coulda, So I did it, I tried it, and hey, it turned out the way it was. I had a great career after that in the military, or at least another 4 years. I did a couple of deployments and had a lot of good experiences, even though I still wasn't a Navy SEAL. So I enjoyed my time in afterwards. So after dropping out of the BUDS program, I got orders to class up to a mobile security squadron, and they were stationed over in Portsmouth, Virginia. I had never been to Virginia. I didn't have much of a desire to go. I actually wanted to stay in San Diego. They had the same type of mobile security squadron in San Diego, and I was like, man, I love it here. It's beautiful, the beaches, it's great. And I wanted to stay in San Diego. However, that was not in the cards. So packed up my vehicle and I traveled across country to Portsmouth, Virginia, where I checked into a mobile security detachment. And I was one of the last members to check in. This was the very first detachment of this whole squadron that they were doing. So we were the very first detachment, or I believe one of the first detachments. And I was one of the last members to join. So there was 80 of us, and I was probably like the 60th or 70th person to come before we started our deployment. So our first deployment was oil platforms off the coast of Iraq. And these oil platforms, this is 2005. So these oil platforms are pivotal. These oil platforms are pivotal in rebuilding Iraq's infrastructure. So they needed security on them. So we got stationed out there for 6 months, my first deployment, on these oil platforms. I like to tell people, if they ever seen the movie Waterworld, it's kind of like that, where you're on this big metal platform in the middle of the ocean, and there's nothing around except a couple of ships that come in. They fill up with oil and they take off. You can't even see land. You can't see nothing. But I loved the experience. I was young, 24, 25-year-old, and I made a little documentary because I had a background in video production and film. So I recorded all of it, made a little documentary about it. We had a blast out there on those oil platforms. We played basketball. We played football. We built some barracks stuff there. They did have some internet, so we got to do some internet. I even recorded a couple movies. Even some ships would come in and they would have basketball hoops on the ships. We'd go up to the ship and we'd play some basketball in there. We had our diamond deck football that we had played as well too. So for me, being a single guy, it was a great experience. I got to put all my stuff in storage, and I got to make deployment money while being on deployment and experience a bunch of cool stuff for the first time.
Was that a part of Iraqi Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom?
That is a good question. It's probably Operation Iraqi Freedom was the first one. So yeah. So the oil platforms, so the deployment to the oil platforms was in support of Operation Iraqi. Blah, blah, blah. There's actually 2 oil platforms that were out there that we went to. So we split our detachment up between 2 platforms. One platform was primarily just males, and the other one was males and females. And so both of those platforms were off the coast of Iraq, and that was in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Yep. Cut right there.
Tell me about some of your bad days out there.
Bad days?
How bad were your bad days? Do you have many?
So on the oil platforms, it's bad days versus good days. It's just days out there. I actually enjoyed deployment because it just kind of got you away from the hustle of everyday life, which was, oh, I got to drive here, I got to go grocery shopping, I got to do this, I got to do that. And when you're out there, everything's simple. You just work and you play on the side and have a little fun. As long as you show up where you're supposed to be, you're already there. You don't have to worry about commuting to work and stuff like that. So, but some bad days included the weather being very hot and humid. And we had a couple sandstorms. Even though we were far off the coast of Iraq, we had some sandstorms that would just blow out to sea. And so we'd have to have some goggles and protective gear on because we'd have these sandstorms that would just come and just hit us for no reason out there in the middle of the platforms. So that was no fun. But also the night shifts, man. The night shifts were rough. It's tough to stay awake in the middle of the night. But we rotated when we were out there. You got the morning shift, the afternoon shift, and like a night shift. I think we had like 8 or 10 hour watches. And so we rotated around. But it worked out. It worked out. We had a good time. So some of the positives were they had a gym there. We get to work out in the gym. They had an area where we could play some football. Made a couple of movies. We even had a rope swing where we can jump off this platform into the ocean, which was great. And heck, we even jumped off of the catwalks a few times. And those are probably 70, 80 feet above the water. So that was a tough one. That was a tall one, but it was great. It was fun. So there were some good days, but there's some bad days. But everything together kind of, meshes together. You're on deployment. Everybody's there as a team. And you just kind of do one day at a time. And make the most of it. That's really what it is. You just make the best of any situation to kind of come out on top and learn from it.
You didn't have anyone decide to take a couple pot shots at you from time to time, did you?
No.
I couldn't imagine. I was gonna say I couldn't imagine anyone going out there in a small boat just to try to.
No, yeah. So we didn't have a whole lot of security issues when we were out there because ISIS, the Taliban, whoever at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of reports of them taking boats and driving so far off the coast in order to attack other vessels. A lot of their stuff was done on the land. So our biggest threat actually was some pirates that were out in what they called deep water anchorage. So these humongous oil tankers would come in and they'd pull alongside this oil platform. And the platform itself is about a mile long. And so you'd get 2 on each side, just one long strip, and then 2 on each side. And so they would spend about 3 or 4 days filling up. So they'd come in really high on the water, and then 3 or 4 days you'd see them, they'd sink down to their water line, and they'd be full of oil, and then they'd take off. Well, you also had about a dozen oil tankers waiting out in deep water anchorage, which was 2, 3, 4 miles, back in the ocean. And they're just anchored out there waiting for their chance to kind of come in. So one of the biggest threats that we faced was, hey, if somebody wants to take over one of these oil tankers and then pirate it into the oil platform and crush it, like that's a huge security risk. So one of the missions that we had started when we were out there was we would take these tugboats, because the tugboats would help push the tankers to the side of the platform safely. We'd take the tugboat out there with the navigator, and we would board the tanker, and we would go ahead and we wouldn't sweep the entire tanker because we just couldn't do that. But we were on the bridge during the time that the tanker was navigated into and next to the platform. So if anybody wanted to take over the oil tanker at that time and try and drive it into the platform, we were there to thwart that. That was the idea. So that was kind of the biggest threat that we had out there, other than sandstorms. While we were on the oil platforms, we were in charge of also training Iraqi security forces to kind of take over our job and our role there. So we were actually on watch, and then there was other Iraqi security forces on watch. And so they would, come in, they'd rotate probably every week from Iraq. They'd rotate in on a boat. They had their own big barracks that they would stay in, one of the rooms on this oil platform. And they'd stand watch with us. So we got to kind of do a little cultural interaction with them. We learned a few words in Arabic and some stuff. There was definitely a communication barrier because they didn't know a ton of English, but they knew a little bit. And so sometimes some of them were cool, and you get to hang out and chat about some things. And other ones just kind of wanted to sit there and mind their own business, and kind of do their job, and that was it. So nonetheless, that was kind of another culture shock or a cultural experience with working with these Iraqi soldiers who were there, hopefully taking over security at one point, but and then they never really did. And boy, I can't tell you what happened or how long we were on those platforms after that. Because once we left, we knew there was a couple other detachments that were, close to our unit that went there and followed us up. But I couldn't tell you what or when or how all that stuff has been going since then. But it was a good experience. And then all the workers, of course, are from Iraq. And so, you can interact with some of the oil platform workers and stuff like that. It was kind of a cool, kind of a good cultural experience. But something that you don't really get here stateside, that's for sure. Once in a lifetime kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's a good little segment. You take that little clip and put it over there with all the Iraqi oil platform stuff. But in cultural for Bahrain, not a whole lot. We went out in town. When we were stationed in Bahrain, when we were deployed in Bahrain, we'd go out in town to some restaurants and stuff, some really good restaurants and stuff like that. But mostly we were on base, and there was a big military base there. So we didn't interact a whole lot with the locals, We took some trips around, and actually that was when we were in Fujairah. So when we were in Bahrain, another mission we had was we were going to do port security for the ships that would pull in to Fujairah. So we were there in Fujairah for about a month and a half. We were in a little house in the town, and we had our own driver, and we had to kind of keep a low profile. But anytime a military vessel would pull in and resupply, we'd go do security for them. But military vessels only pulled in like 2 or 3 times out of the whole month. So that was 2 or 3, maybe 10 or 12 days the whole month we worked. The rest of the time we're collecting per diem, and we're going to the gym or going to eat somewhere that night, finding a cool place to eat, or just kind of hanging out. We had this big house. We all slept in these bunk beds in this big house in Fujairah. We actually went to Dubai. So we got a trip to Dubai. We went to Dubai, which was great. We went to just the desert area. They have these caverns, which are really cool. So a lot of cool experiences being deployed, on that mission in Fujairah in the UAE when we were kind of on our second deployment. So that was definitely another cool experience as well. In addition to our unit providing security on the oil platforms, we also had 3 coalition ships that were circling the platform. So we were kind of the last line of defense if anything made it past them. So we had usually a Navy destroyer out there, and there's like a Coast Guard, a smaller Coast Guard vessel, and another vessel from another country. I know Britain was there for a little while. The UK, they had some vessels out there, but they were the ones that would actually bring us food. So every day they would bring meals on keels, is what we call it. And the food from the galley of the ship would be brought in. They'd have it in their coolers, and that's how we eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner from the ships that were out there surrounding us. Yeah. So that was interesting. And of course, we had our own snacks and stuff that we got from goodie packets because we got mail and everything too. And it would come through those ships and come to us. But yeah, so we were kind of the last line of defense before if anything got past the ship. So it was really a pretty secure area. And like I said, other than that, there's just the pirates that might go out and even rob some of these oil tankers out in the deep water anchorage. Even sometimes the ships would send some of their small boats and crafts to go, stroll around there and kind of thwart that operations, or they'd fly their helicopters out there in order to discourage any pirates that might have been out there. So it was all in all, there was a lot of stuff going on. But, as long as you focus on your one job and your one piece of the puzzle and kind of like your one role, and you hope everybody else is doing the same thing, then it kind of paints a big security picture and just your mission in general.
Well, I'm sure you were not very happy when your 6 months were up then.
Actually,
It sounds like a great duty post.
Yeah, when you first get there, when you first arrive on an oil platform, you're like, oh my God, it's overwhelming. The one thing you had to do is hump all your gear off of the ship onto the platform, and then from there you bring it to the different barracks and send it to different areas. So you're thinking, wow, I got to spend 6 months here. This is forever. And before you know it, 3 months has passed, and you're like, oh, we're halfway. And then before you know it, 6 months arrives. You're like, dude, it's time to go already. And so, yeah, part of you is like, okay, I'm ready to get back to regular life. But the other part of you is like, man, it's kind of nostalgic out here. Like, when are we ever going to do something like this again? Not that you want to be there forever, but you definitely, want to appreciate these experiences in your life, and I certainly did while they're going on, because time goes by quick, and before you know it, they're gone, and you're moving on to something else. And just like that, we were off the platform. We were back in Bahrain. We were there for like 2 weeks before we jumped all of our stuff on a plane, went through customs, and flew back to the States. And after that, it was just a memory. We had videos and pictures to kind of remember it, and that was it.
It says here that you were in Bahrain for another 6 months. Is that right?
That was a second deployment, yeah.
The second deployment?
That was also Operation Iraqi Freedom. So for our second deployment, we were in Bahrain for Operation Iraqi Freedom as well. And from there, it was a little different. We were stationed on the base in Bahrain, and our 80-unit detachment, we would then get augmented out. Smaller units like boat units or Raven units, we'd get augmented out to do security for various jobs that the military needed us for. And so one of the jobs that I got to do, we were on a ship for about 3 months. We were on a Navy supply ship. So there is, I believe, 12 of us, 24. There's 24 of us, because we had 12 in the day crew and 12 in the night crew, 12-hour shifts. And we were providing security for a Navy supply ship that was supplying all the other military ships in the NAG. So on this supply vessel, it's mostly civilian. It's like all civilians except for a handful of cryptic and intel specialists that were on there, and of course our security team. But so it was kind of different working on a civilian supply ship, because they had their jobs just like a regular military vessel would, but they were just civilians, so they didn't have all the uniforms and kind of the rank and salute that you would from a military structure. So, but it was, we were doing security, so I can make it sound really cool. We had 50 caliber machine guns, we had our M16s, I had an M4, we had our little grenade launchers, if you want to do those, Mark 19 grenade launcher, and, but like we're sitting there just watching the ocean, and making sure no boats come and blow us up. And there's, again, the chances of a boat driving around out there with some bombs on it to try and blow you up in the middle of that huge Arabian Gulf is very slim. So you get a little stir crazy being out there on the ocean. But nonetheless, a lot of our security duties were kind of ramped up when we would pull into port, and then they would load a bunch of the stuff onto the ship. That's how they restocked the ship, resupplied the ship. Then we'd go out and we would resupply other ships. So we'd have various destroyers and cruisers pull alongside of us, and they would either zip line the supplies, pallets over, or they do a helo, and they just helo them over and drop them off. So both of those were kind of cool to watch and experience for those. But yeah, it was a great 3 months. After that, we got 2 weeks in Greece that we got to hang out before we got back to Bahrain. So it was kind of like plane hopping after your deployment. Greece, 2 weeks, hang out there, and then boom, back at it again in Bahrain. So it was a good time. It was a good time, just like anything else. Different, challenging, but you kind of just have a positive attitude and you just enjoy the experience that you're on. It's hard to tell kind of which locals like you and don't like you. We certainly got to interact with a handful of folks that were curious about Americans and that definitely liked Americans, but a lot of folks just kind of kept their distance. And just kind of went about their own way, when we were out in town. Nobody had this curiosity to come chat with us. I think when we were in Bahrain, the base had been there forever. So military American soldiers had been around that area forever, so they were it wasn't anything new to them. So that wasn't something that they were just kind of like biting at the bit to come out. And that whole area was just a very prosperous area, and there's a mall there we'd go to, so there was all sorts of stuff going on. Just like any town around here. But yeah, so nobody really, and there was a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life too. Because it's Bahrain, so folks are flying in. It's really close to Saudi Arabia, so you got kind of folks from kind of all over there. Especially when we did our little mission down to Fujairah in Dubai. Dubai has got a ton of different walks of life, so seeing an American walking around isn't like a big deal, and so nobody really comes up to you to chat with you or anything, but you get some side looks. And so one of the things that they train us on and they brief us on is kind of operational security, and just kind of keep your head on a swivel and make sure nobody's trying to kidnap you. The chances in some of these areas are low, but some areas are higher than others. But nonetheless, there's always areas of the town you want to stay out of as well too. So that's just something that as a military member, you wanna keep in the back of your head that, hey, I might be out at this mall and I'm on my day off, but still something can go down, and you're never kind of away from that. And that's kind of the difference of being out overseas, is you're never really away from something might happen to you, or some situation might go down and you're in the military, so you gotta react. Whereas, over here you can kind of relax a little bit. You can enjoy your life. You're not, when you get off your job, you're off your job. So that's a little bit of a difference there. So as I ended my military career here, we had one last deployment before I got out, and it was in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. And for this deployment, we were stationed in Spain, so Rota, Spain. And I actually was looking forward to it. I thought I would learn a lot of Spanish, be immersed in the culture. But again, you're on the base, a military base in Spain, so you don't really get off base a whole lot. And most of the people on base speak English, so I didn't get quite the opportunity that I thought I would with, learning some of the language and some of the culture. Now, we did do some stuff on that deployment outside of working, which was we volunteered our time. We saw some really cool old churches and some old buildings where we'd go and help clean up and fix up some of the areas, and some really great culture that was there, that had been there for hundreds of years. And so that was really cool seeing that. But a lot of stuff we did out of Rota was we did a lot of Raven missions. So I was part of a Raven team, and we provided security for the Navy's high-valued assets, specifically their aircraft. And so we would fly on these aircraft and provide security while they went to airfields that didn't have adequate security, or were in areas that were a little more dangerous than others. So they were either dropping off stuff, or they were picking up something, or they were just parking there for the night in order to refuel and fly somewhere the next day. So anyway, the Navy has this, $100 million asset, and they charge 4 or 6 of us as security personnel to follow that asset around and keep an eye on it and protect it so it doesn't get damaged, broken, and that stuff. So that was, we did a lot of those missions out of Spain. And my deployment was actually cut short because that was towards the end of my career. And so I was only there for about 4 months before I came back just right after Christmas time. And then I started my separation, and I got out in February 2009.
What was that like, your last day?
So my last days in the military were interesting. It was tough saying goodbye to a lot of the folks in my detachment, because I had been with a lot of them since 2004. But when you're in the military, you understand people come and go. And since we started in 2004, many of those folks had left along the way. And I had actually extended an extra year just to get to my 5 years, just to get this one last deployment in, or part of it anyway. And so I was one of the original guys from the first deployment, and we had a lot of new folks in and stuff like that. So we understand, in the military, you understand, like, people come and go all the time. But nonetheless, it was kind of sad, saying goodbye to some of the folks that had been around since the beginning. And then going back to Portsmouth, Virginia, most of our whole squadron was all deployed, so the building was kind of empty. And so you just kind of go in, check off all your check marks for your paperwork to get on out and separate, and do what you got to do, go to your different departments, and that's kind of it. Pack all your stuff up, and you take off. On your last day, you sign your papers, and you get on out. So at that point, I was excited to move on to the next chapter in my life. So it wasn't sad that I got out, because when I first got in, I initially wanted to make a career out of it, 20 years. But after 3, 4, 5 years, I felt like I had experienced enough. I felt like I was ready to move on and grow in different ways than what the military had to offer. And so I separated from the military, and I was looking to go to California and work in the entertainment industry. That was my big thing. My next big thing was separate, go to California. I was still young, 28, 29. I said, I might as well do something like this while I'm young. And so I was going to go to California, work in the entertainment industry, and just try my luck out there, I guess. So it was sad to leave, but also it was exciting for the next chapter in my life, and I was ready to move on. So that's a good question. Summarize what it meant to be a soldier in the military. And I can tell you this, I didn't have kind of a clear definition or a clear summary of what it meant to be a soldier back when I was serving. And that's mainly because when you're in a military town, there's a lot of military folks around. And so kind of everybody's in the military, even the civilians are used to, oh, there's military here. It's not like a big deal. It's only when you get out and you separate and you go to places that don't have military bases and don't have a large military population that you really get to see the folks that are appreciative of your service. And then that's when you really begin to appreciate what you have done to serve for the country. Because when I was younger and I was doing it, it was just kind of a job. You know, it was a fun job. It was a job that got me the ability to travel. Like I went to Rome. Like when would I ever go to Rome and see the cathedral and all these things? I would never unless I paid thousands of dollars. So to me, it was kind of an exciting, adventurous job, career, but it never was like this, hey, I'm serving the American people, the country and stuff. It was only after I got out that I could really appreciate what I had done and my dedication to my service. Because when you get older, you begin to look back on all that stuff, and then you have people that thank you, and there's a lot of stuff that showcases their support for the military, and you're like, oh wow, I did that, yeah, like that was me, and you get a different sense of pride after you get out. So that's kind of my take on it. I would personally recommend that everybody, if you're able to, do some time in the military and serve in the military. Now, a lot of people think, oh, the military is so strict, I have to do this, do that. Part of it, yes. But the other part is it exposes you to a lot more than what you're gonna get if you just work at a civilian job, you know, and just go back and forth every day in your life. Like, there's a lot more to it, but you get a lot more from it in the long run. And so even if you do 2 years, you know, you work at a duty station or you go on a ship or you're in the Air Force and you experience the military life, the rank and file structure, and how they organize and implement certain tactical solutions and situations. Even if you experience that and the discipline of it, it's better than not experiencing it, in my opinion. So I would encourage, if you're on the fence or even thinking about it, it's something great to do while you're young, because you can do it while you're young, and then you can still move on, and you can still go to college, you can still get your degree. Okay, I went to college after I got out of the military, and it was paid for by the military. So I got my bachelor's and I got my master's degree. So there's a lot of opportunities after you serve, once you serve, and you get a lot from it. So I would encourage anybody that's looking at it, or even folks that aren't looking at it, to possibly consider it. So looking back, I can definitely appreciate my time in the military. You know, I was part of a community. I was part of a group of people that had a goal and a mission. And we did stuff that normal people don't get to do. You know, I flew in helicopters. You know, I shot 50 caliber machine guns and Mark 19 grenade launchers at, you know, gun ranges, going overseas on these different ships and different vessels and vehicles. Like, you just don't do that, you know, when you're a regular civilian, you know? So the experiences I got out of it were tenfold, and have definitely helped me in every aspect of my life. So looking back, serving definitely benefited me more than I could have ever imagined.